So first of all, I really want to thank everyone for coming out here, especially Lynn and Robin. This has been an incredible journey just to get to this point today, and the number of emails that went back and forth, and all the folks that have been involved in putting all this together has been pretty fantastic. So thank you guys so much. I'd like to give them a round of applause first. So I'm going to try to keep it short because I know that you guys all want to go play golf, even though I don't really do that myself. I have some clubs sitting in my closet at home, and they're pretty amazing, but I don't really know how to use them. But I kind of wanted to just really kind of maybe tell a few stories, talk a little bit about some of the things that I've learned, maybe hit on a few points there. But really to start, I kind of want to rewind just a little bit. Roughly about a year ago, I was sitting in my office, and I get this email, and it's from this guy named Robin Reyes. I had absolutely no idea who this guy was, but in his email he said, your friend George P. Bush said that you would be really great for this conference down here in Mexico, and we want you to come and talk. It's called Emprende tu Mexico. And I said, okay, George referred me, okay, I guess I better pay attention to this one. So I responded, and I'm like, okay, well, worst case scenario, I get to go hang out on a beach in Mexico and talk about tech and what's wrong with that picture. That sounds pretty amazing to me. So I hop on an airplane some months later and I fly down to Mexico, and I go through customs and pulling my suitcase along and walking out to the car, I'm walking out of the airport, and some guy's standing there with my name on it, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. This is a lot easier than I expected. Walk out to the car and put my bag inside. I open up the door, and there's a Pacifico. And I'm like, welcome to Mexico. This is amazing. Plus one Robin. So we're heading to from Puerto Vallarta to Punta Mita, and we get to these big, giant, like brown gates with like jungle pouring over them. I'm like, okay, where are we going? Like, is this like Jurassic Park? What's going on here? I don't really quite understand this, but it looks pretty cool. Go through and get to the St. Regis, and that's kind of where we were doing it that one year. And I got up there, and I got out of the car, and it's, of course, the most ridiculous view, that you've ever probably seen. And of course, somebody throws a glass of champagne in my hand. I'm like, this is amazing. Who wouldn't want to come here? So Robin rolls up in a golf cart, and he's like, hey, Tom, let's go. Hop on in. We'll put your bag over here. I'm like, okay. So I hop in the golf cart and kind of like drives me around, and it's just like, wow, this is, ridiculous. This place is magical. And, we were heading to a gentleman's house by the name of Jerry Kern, and who turns out to be quite the rock star. Get there, and, of course, Robin, sits down, and I sit down, and we're just sort of sitting there talking about tech and entrepreneurship. And then he gets up, and he's like, you want a margarita? Let me go get some limes, and like literally makes me like a fresh margarita. I'm like, okay, what the hell does this guy want? I think he's like trying to get me drunk or something. So, we get up there. We spend probably the rest of the afternoon just sort of watching the sunset, talking about social entrepreneurship, technology, all the things that I love to talk about. And it was a really great sort of first experience. But what was most interesting to me is when the next day I'm sort of rolling up into this panel, and wasn't quite sure exactly who I was going to be hanging out with. The sort of information gap was quite substantial at that point in time. It was kind of hacked together. It was sort of an impromptu event. And so I get up there, and of course, I have Lynn Hoffman, who's sitting back there, who's this corporate rock star that sits on like 37 boards and has the most amazing advice in the world. And John Rubinstein, this guy that like basically invented the iPod, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? This is crazy. So and then I'm sitting there, and there's Karen Richardson, and she was chairman of High Five, and George P. Bush, who today is now running for Texas statewide office, following, I guess, in the family footsteps. And then, of course, there's this other dude, and his name's Meatloaf, and he's moderating our panel. And I'm like, wow, this is the oddest cast of characters I've ever seen in my life. And he actually prefers to go by Meat, for whatever that's worth. So, yeah, I know, it's the most amazing thing. But a really cool guy, pretty intense guy, but really cool guy. So, we had this ridiculous panel, and it was just this amazing conversation, and, the finance minister of Mexico is speaking. I'm like, this is just the most rock star, event I've ever been to in my life, and this is really amazing. And, later that evening, we were, again, drinking again, and I think much of you have already experienced that by now. I'm sitting there with George and Robin and Lynn and a few other people, and we're having tequila. And apparently you sip tequila. That was something that was really new to me. So anyways, we get there, and we're sipping this tequila, and I'm just like, at that point, I had this sort of little love project on the side that I had sort of coined, was thinking, okay, startup in paradise. This is where I want to build my next startup. This would be really amazing. Surrounded by pristine beauty and inspiration, and how could I come here and live for 9 months and just become elite? And it was funny because Lynn and I were just riffing back and forth for at least a few hours because she had been thinking the exact same thing. And I was like, wow, this is really amazing. This could be a really fantastic opportunity. And I think that is really the birth of what you guys are experiencing today, which started about a year ago in the Seabreeze, where you guys were actually at last night, which is kind of interesting, right? Yeah, so, and it was her birthday last night, and she didn't even tell me. I was so pissed off. Maybe I should go build a birthday app to remind myself. So anyways, that kind of came away from that conference, and long story short, 2 months later, Lynn's pounding out these emails to me, and I'm pounding out emails to her, and she goes, guess what, I got a business plan, let's do this. And so that was really the birth of it all, and I really am very thankful for what they have achieved. They've done just a fantastic job. But after that trip, I really began to question, well, let me sort of rewind a little bit before that. By that point in time, I had raised my first seed round of funding from Mike Maples, who happens to be here in the room, and another gentleman by the name of Reed Hoffman. And I began to really think about, why is it that these guys are so legendary, right? And I know Mike is maybe even blushing right now, but the whole ecosystem really sees a lot of what they do as being legendary. I mean, Forbes consistently ranks these guys as some of the top investors in the world. Why? I don't really understand that. Having been an entrepreneur that experienced, the door being slammed in my face 1,000 times before I finally got a yes, why is that? It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And that really kind of brings me to sort of the next sort of story. I was probably a matter of months after this whole, Punta MITA experience. I was having my first sit down with Reed after, months of having taken his money and yet not given him an update, which he probably doesn't care, but I really wanted to give him an update and tell him where we were. At least at the time, I thought he didn't care. So I'm spending, 48 hours just cranking on a deck, pulling out stats, making this most amazing, beautiful PowerPoint of my life. I'm going to go see The Godfather, and this is going to be an experience all on its own. And of course, up to the very last minute, Silicon Valley time, 15 minutes, post-departure, I'm finally getting ready to leave. And of course, it's early in the morning, and so the 101 is just crazy packed. And I'm driving from San Francisco all the way down to Mountain View. And I am just hauling ass, and I'm super pissed off at myself. I'm like, I'm late for Reid Hoffman. Like, this is so dumb. Shame on you. This is not what you do to a guy like Reid Hoffman. So I'm driving. I finally get to LinkedIn campus, and I zoom up to the closest spot I could get, potentially right there at the front of the door. And of course, there's no parking spots. So I had to go back and park like 10 blocks away, it felt like. And I get out and I'm like running in, to the LinkedIn office, pausing for like the last 10 yards so I can just wipe all the sweat off so I don't look like I've been running. Roll up into Reid Hoffman's office, and the secretary's sitting there, and she's like, I'm like, I'm here to meet with Reid. She's like, okay, great, yeah. Reid's running about 10 minutes late, so yeah, just have a seat right over here. So again, Silicon Valley time. You just never know, what it's going to be. So I'm sitting there waiting. I'm, sweating but not running. Reid's about to come out and talk to me, and I feel like, okay, I got an hour with him. I'm just going to like drain him from as much knowledge as I absolutely can, because it might be 6 months before I get to talk to him again. So we go in. He comes out, and he's just got this giant smile on his face. He's like a big giant teddy bear, and he's just super in love with the fact that I'm there. And he takes me back into his office there at LinkedIn, and he sits down, and I remember my first observation, wow, he's not a Mac guy, he's a PC guy. This is really interesting. I don't know, it's just an observation. But I, pull out my MacBook, I'm like gearing up for this, like, okay, I'm gonna dump all this in, I'm gonna make him super happy, because like, there's all this momentum, and I've got all these great excuses on like why things aren't working, but we're gonna talk about the good stuff first. And I flip it open, and he turns to me, so he says, Tom, so tell me, how are you doing? And I thought for a minute, and I said, oh shit, I didn't prepare a slide for this one. How do I actually handle this? Or I'm like kind of like stuttering through like this response. Like I should actually know this answer, but clearly I didn't prepare. And I kind of sit there, and I just sort of started unloading on him, right? I'm like, oh my God, this shit's blowing up over here, and this is going on, and like, employees and all this stuff, and it was like therapy, more than anything else. So then we proceeded to sit there and talk, and he told me that some guy had reached out to him, and I don't remember how we got on the subject, but he said some other company or CEO or founder or something reached out to him and said, hey, I saw you invested in Rally. I didn't realize that you were important in interested in this space. And I'll never really forget like what he said. He said, I told the guys, I'm not really interested in this space, but I am interested in my entrepreneurs. And I thought that was like a really profound statement. And it really kind of led me to a lot of how I began to really think about investors. And I realized that the best investors in the world invest in great entrepreneurs. And I think that is one of the most important things to take away as, whether you're an investor, investing in them, but it's really thinking about it as investing in people more than anything else. And, there I am, like, end of our meeting, and I didn't even go through my deck. I had spent, like, days preparing this deck for him, but yet I felt amazing because he actually gave a fuck about me. And I think that was a really awesome moment for me. And, that kind of leads me to sort of my second point, which is entrepreneurship is a really tough job. I like to tell people, if you succeed, nobody's really going to notice. But if you fail, everybody's going to know, right? It's like the worst paradox ever. So, I kind of began to really think about and formulate a lot of different sort of ideas when it came to that whole, philosophy. And I think probably there's a couple different things. Most recently, I was at a Google Ventures sort of portfolio conference, and Kevin Rose is interviewing Ben Horowitz, and I don't know if you read his blog or not, but it's pretty awesome. If you really want to learn, about what entrepreneurship means, he's got a fantastic blog for that. And, he's sitting there and he's like, Kevin's like, so what's the number one thing you look for in investing in entrepreneurs? And he turned around and he said, courage. And I thought, oh shit, that's right. He's like, you have to have courage to have good integrity. You have to have courage to pivot. You have to have courage to follow your gut. Like, you know, the number of times where I'm like, this is either going to be really awesome or this is going to be really terrible. Am I going down the right path? Am I doing the right thing? And really, at the end of the day, that to me became, you know, one of the most important virtues of an entrepreneur is having courage and being able to really kind of, you know, excel and persevere and have good integrity. But having the courage to do those things is really important. And I think that, you know, that kind of like goes into a little bit of what, you know, building, you know, a company is all about. There's a really great talk that also, again, fundamentally changed my view of the world. I have all these like worldview, you know, from my whole life is all about these like little moments in time that have like fundamentally changed who I am. And there was this, you know, I had this great opportunity to go sit down with a gentleman by the name of Bing Gordon. And if you don't know who he is, you should definitely Google him. He sits on the board of like Amazon and like, I don't know, Apple or something like that. These huge companies. And he has this talk that's about building internet treasures. And if you Google Bing Gordon, Mark Pincus, internet treasures like Stanford, there's a great hour-long video about what that means. And what it really means is not really thinking about building a company for, yes, revenue is certainly really important, and you know, how you operate, what products you sell, and what you're selling, and all these different things. But really, it's about building an icon of a generation. And you know, you look at companies like Amazon and Facebook and Apple; they're icons. They're going to stand, you know, they're going to span the sands of time, right? They're going to be around. Microsoft, he's, you know, years and years and years living beyond itself, and it will for a really, really long time. And I really found that that was a really great North Star for guiding me as an entrepreneur with purpose. And being able to really think about building Rally into not just a company, but an icon of my generation. And that's what really drives a lot of my focus every day. It's not about what I'm building, where I'm going, or anything like that. Certainly I have product roadmap and vision and where I want to be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. But you know I want to go power the cause economy. What does that mean? I don't even know really what that means. I have certainly a good understanding of various points and what that means, but I know that I'm going to just go that way. And I'm going to pivot and turn along the way. And you know, that is really scary because you're kind of just like driving into this dark gray nebulous cloud. And hopefully you actually make it. Which I think brings me to my third point, which is, you know, probably one of, you know, I certainly have made a lot of mistakes in that one. But I have found that like one of the most important things you can't do is outsource your culture. And I have been guilty of making that as a CEO. You go from 5 employees to like 25, and you're like, holy shit, what the fuck's going on? And there's like this person over here and personalities there, and how do you manage all these people and teams and process and or golden processes, as Bing would say. And you know, I outsource the culture, and it's like, really, no. At the end of the day, my job as a CEO and founder is to define the culture. You know, and that's really, you know, so important. It's probably one of the most important parts of the interview, because everybody that you bring into your company is going to contribute or deviate you from that culture. And I found that by, you know, really, you know, ratcheting up, and I think Kevin had a really, I'm going to have to invite him over, and he's actually an advisor to Rally. He's going to have to come over and share these little packets with me on, you know, his different engineers and stuff. Like, I really thought that was fantastic. And those are the kind of things that I really want to mimic. And, you know, a lot of the, you know, culture definition means team and editing your teams quickly. Jack Dorsey, thinks of himself as, the editor-in-chief, and I think that's a really fantastic way to think about your job as a CEO, is to edit your teams quickly, or break up early, And, it's the most gut-wrenching experience ever when you have to let somebody go or move one person to another spot. And that, again, takes courage, right? And it's like all these little things like build back up to it. And, from whether it's your investors or your employees, I've really come to find that teams and team building and the people that you hire are, some of the most important things and most important decisions that you can make in the company. And I've just been really blessed, most recently to be surrounded, by folks like Mike Maples Sr., who, built huge teams at Microsoft, and Bill Campbell, and, you get to hear these guys, and they all the time, team, culture. And it's like, you do those things, and you're going to build a great company, especially one that has a North Star that's focused in some sort of larger purpose. And that really kind of brings me to what I would like to close with, another mistake, or I guess I don't know if it's a mistake, but a little tidbit of information that I probably wish I would have followed a little bit more closely. When I was first taking money, I had a mentor. His name was Ross Garber. And Ross is a really amazing person, ridiculously smart. He, early on in the 90s, built a company called Vignette, and a lot of us may not necessarily know what that company is, but they were pretty much like the first content management system for like enterprise software. So a lot of the websites you would go to in the early 90s, like the CNETs of the world and stuff, they were leveraging a Vignette content management system. And he certainly built a great company, IPO'd at $1 billion, walked away with $300 million. I've been on his jet. It's pretty fucking amazing. It's, he told me like really early on, before we took our first round of funding, he says, okay, before you do this, pause. He said, you need to go to your founders and you need to list these 4 things: money, power, legacy, fame. And you need to get each of your founders to prioritize those 4 things to what matters to them, the most. And it was certainly it's an exercise that I would encourage all of you to do. If you're an entrepreneur and you're going to partner with somebody or build a company or go anywhere, you should do this. This is really quite telling about where each of you have your individual priorities. So I went to my founders, like, okay, I'm going to do this. I went to my founders and asked them all, to do this for me, and they told me their responses. And, the most interesting thing that, there was 4 of us at the time. We were moving from Austin, Texas. We had bootstrapped ourselves up to our first round. And 3 of the 4 founders came back, and their priorities were exactly the same. One of them, the priorities were not the same. And it's really interesting because you fast forward 1 year later, 3 of the founders still exist, 1 does not. And I think that was really interesting because I didn't really think about it so much after I did it. I was like, okay, that's cool, good to know. But at the end of the day, what I realized was, we were all going this direction and 1 was going that direction. And that was team, right? You're building your team, you're editing your team, you're having the courage to do that. And I would certainly really encourage all of you to do that. If the best investors in the world invest in great entrepreneurs, then I would think that the best entrepreneurs in the world invest in great teams. And I hope that really a lot of what we are doing sort of here this weekend is investing in each other. That's what the Punta MITA or the MITA Institute is really all about. And I hope that a lot of your experiences here, the talks and the different things, I've heard a lot of these things echoed throughout the last couple days. They're all totally accurate. And I hope that your experience here with Punta MITA was as magical and inspiring as my first experience here. And thank you all so much for coming out here and supporting you know, Lynn and Robin and everybody here that has put together this amazing and wonderful production. It's certainly just the beginning of something very, very important that's happening here. So thank you.